Welcome to the Vine Resources podcast show. Hi and welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources podcast show. I'm David Lawrence and I'm delighted to have today with me Iain Chalmers, from the Managing Director from the Holst Group. Iain, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Iain, I'd like to do a little bit of an introduction for yourself, if that's okay. I'll give you the chance to give an introduction. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Iain, and about your business?
Sure. Well, I'm the Managing Director of the Holst Group. So as the Holst Group, we have two parts to our business. We have a psychometric assessment, and we're the European distributors of the McQuaig Psychometric System. And then we have a range of different training programs for subject areas like business communication skills, thinking and creativity, etc. So we've been working with names such as Dr. Edward de Bono for many, many years, for example. So we're based in Henley-on-Thames. My background is actually in marketing and graphic design, but I came into this business about 15 years ago. It was a family company, and I thought I'd spend about 18 months learning business and all that kind of stuff, and then I ended up taking over as managing director, and my wife and I now own the business. So it's been a very enjoyable 15 years. But as an organisation, I guess it's the easiest way of summing up what we believe is that people are happier, they're more loyal, and they perform better when they're in the right role. And so everything that we do from the Holst Group underpins that ethos.
And Iain, we've had a bit of a relationship. We've met a few times in the past where we've actually used used the McQuaig behavioural assessment for our retained search for our clients. I'm interested to talk a little bit about that, but first, I'd be interested to know a little bit more about perhaps what a normal day looks like for you. Tell us a little bit about what a day looks like in your business.
Pretty mixed, I guess. For the past couple of years, we've been restructuring, so a lot of that has taken up, a lot of my time is taken up with that. We've changed from a model of using a lot of consultants and associates through to fully employed complement of staff. So typical days working with my internal team, out seeing clients, understanding what it is that's changing in their businesses so that we can adapt our team to meet those changing challenges that they have all the time. I'm doing a lot of recruitment at the moment, but I guess it's easy for a business owner to really get pulled into the day-to-day. So I always feel as an owner, it's your responsibility to try and step out of that as much as possible and work on the business, not in the business.
Now, you work with a range of organisations from smaller companies to very large corporations, and we've talked in the past about organisations that perhaps already have a behavioural system or process in place, but perhaps are not using it to its full, or perhaps it's got forgotten about, or not everyone's using it consistently. What do you see in the marketplace at the moment that's the biggest challenge for organisation in utilising behavioural systems?
That's an interesting question, because I think it's different for every business depending on where they are in their life cycle, but also in how structured their HR team is as well. But I'd say the most difficulty that organisations get into is when there isn't the level of competence in the business around psychometrics. I think it's very easy, especially that it's so easy to implement online these days, that it is easy for someone to pick up a report, not really understanding what's behind it, not being able to interpret it. You take it back kind of 20 years ago, and everybody who used a psychometric assessment was having to manually score. So you'd have the candidate in front of you, they complete a paper form or survey, you'd manually score it, you'd create the graph or whatever whatever the output was, and then you would literally write the reports. Now, if you think about how the skill level of someone who went through learning how to assess an individual through that versus someone that's going through it today that can pick up a 30-page report that's generated in a couple of minutes, that's actually really much more tricky. And when we speak with our clients that we've been working with for 30 years, actually, in a lot of regards, they are the experts, because they went through that really difficult, challenging, and time-consuming way of learning about psychometrics. So I'd say, actually, from an organizational perspective, it's the training, it's the understanding, it's the taking the time that no one really has these days to really get to know the tool and understand what it's trying to, what it's helping you understand about the individual.
And how can, just for listeners who perhaps don't use behavioural assessments, what is the basic benefits to organisations to use behavioural assessments over and above what they're doing perhaps already?
I think there are three key areas, I guess. Better fit, reduced turnover, and performance. I think from a fit perspective, the majority of organisations will create a job description of the role, but that tends to be the kind of tasks and the goals or any KPIs that they have. What we see with organisations is that when we start working with them, they can start creating job descriptions, but based on their behaviours, what successful behaviours look like in that role. And that gives us a much better degree of fit. If you get a better degree of fit, you're going to reduce your turnover. So all that time spent from managers interviewing, sifting through CVs, doing all of that great stuff that takes them off the job that they should be doing, that reduces. And then the last one is increasing performance. If you've got a better fit, if you're getting people staying longer in that role, then you're going to increase the performance within the business. So those are the three main areas.
If you're in a large organisation, who should take ownership and own that process into reviewing and analysing those reports? Because that could also be a challenge, I suspect.
Absolutely. And I think, again, going back 20 years, it would have been the line manager's responsibility, and then that has been devolved to HR over the time. People issues, people decisions, but actually we see that coming much more back round to the line manager, because ultimately they're responsible for that individual and the performance of that individual. So it absolutely should be the line manager.
And what do you see is the biggest challenge with organisations perhaps who have implemented a process, but perhaps it's dropped off and no one's taken accountability for it? How do those organisations redevelop that and re-engage the line managers to see the business benefit of putting that in place?
I think it comes back to the competence, the training, the understanding of a tool like this. And I think if it's implemented, I'm going to say poorly. I don't really mean poorly. I mean that if it's not good, if it doesn't have the buy-in from the line managers from the outset, then that makes it very difficult to gain traction. And HR, like all departments within an organisation, want to deliver projects and tools into the business that don't cost the business time. They can only see benefit out of that. And so it's really about the implementation phase, getting that right, and letting the supplier or the partner support them in that, by helping them, by training them up to an expert level, but also acting as that backup for the organisation as they're trying to push this out to the rest of the business.
Iain, there's lots of companies out there in the world providing behavioural assessments of some degree. If what advice would you give to someone perhaps in an organisation that's been set the task to go out and research and find one? Because again, it's very confusing. What are the key things that you would advise someone to consider that's actually, that they would have to think and consider that's really important to them before they, invest money and invest time and energy within the organisation to implement something new?
Yeah, I think there are a few different areas. I think from a start, it's trying to understand what you're looking to assess, and making sure that the tool matches that. So, for example, I had a conversation with an organisation yesterday who was looking at to use an emotional intelligence assessment, and when we boiled it down, actually it wasn't EQ, emotional quotient, that they were looking to assess. It was something different. But someone had said, well, I think EQ is, or EI, or any of these tools actually, I think we should be doing this, but it's really understanding what the assessment is going to measure, why you need it for this particular role, and that it's fit for purpose. The second thing is how you're going to use the tools. For example, many tools are on a kind of a pay-per-click basis, and so that really drives the behavior of how you use the tool. You may only use it for second interviews or third interviews. You may use it sparingly. We work with organisations is that we work on an unlimited access basis. So it's like a site license based on the headcount. And what that allows the organisation to do is to use it as much as possible throughout that 12-month period with no extra costs or anything like that. That allows them to use it at first-line interviews. It allows them to manage and develop and really integrate the tool into the business. So, going back to the question you asked a second ago, how do you drill and really embed the tools into the business? You make it easy for your HR teams and your line managers to use the tools without having to dip into more budget.
I'd love to know what you think if in 5 years or even 10 years' time, with the advent of AR and VR, I'm just curious how you see behavioural assessments changing with the technology that's going to be around us, and how that's going to benefit an organisation.
It's a good point, because I think organisations are going to want more data points about their employees, and I think assessment is really only scratching the surface of what we can do and how we can help an organisation, because it's still really predominantly used just at the recruitment stage. There aren't many organisations that take it through, but actually that's when you get the real value. So I think more data points about employees is going to be really critical. So at the moment we have assessments that are available at recruitment, but then understanding how someone prefers to be managed will give the manager something different, and then bringing on different tools in order to get those different data points. So, for example, I think we were just having a quick chat before we started about 360. We're launching a 360 that's a little bit different from the majority out there later on in the year. But the key thing is that those 360 tools link back to the assessments that you're using at recruitment stage. Because if you're using the same tools at both recruitment, management, development, and understanding of those individuals, they have to link together in order for you to generate a proper holistic understanding of that individual. So as technology gets better, I think the tools themselves are going to get more complex underneath the skin, but actually it's going to be much more easy for the users to use them.
I totally agree, and it's going to get a very exciting time as well in the next few years, and I'm looking forward to seeing those changes. Iain, just to ask you a few final questions, if that's okay. I'd love to ask you, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received in business?
I've received many pieces of advice in business. The best one, I think the best one is, it's a simple one. Done is better than doing. I think for so many different reasons, but done is better than doing. Don't keep on working at something. Just get it. It's better if it's out there. It's better if it's released. You can fix issues on the fly as long as it gets to a certain point, but just get things out.
And what advice would you give people looking to join your industry, for example?
I think what really helps is getting experience with the departments you're going to be working with predominantly. So in our world, we work predominantly with HR as a gateway into the rest of the organisation to support their line managers, and we work with learning development teams a lot as well. And so getting experience with both of those areas is going to be really give you a good foot in the door.
And how do you see organisations changing in the future?
Any particular place to start with that? Because I think that's quite a wide question.
Okay, perhaps how do you see organisations changing in terms of their engagement with their employees?
I think there is going to be, I see actually much more of a trust partnership being built. Within this world that we live in that seems to be all about conflict and trying to get one up on other people. There are certainly industries that are like that, but it seems that some people coming into business at the moment are looking for something that is a kind of a right of theirs, that they should have a role. We see this in society as well. I should have a house. I should be able to do this, but I don't want to give up that other stuff. And I think with organisations there has to be more of a trust contract between the organisation and the employee to really start to get the best out of that person. And I think, tying that back into assessment, if you have a line manager that is managing the person in the way that they like to be managed, and that person is in a role that suits how their natural strengths are coming through, then you are going to get a much better base in which to build that trust.
Absolutely. And Iain, look, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. What's the best way of people to get in touch with you?
We have our social channels, so the Holst Group on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, all of those socials. We also have our handles for the McQuaig Psychometric System as well, and the normal websites, but we'd love to hear from you.
I will put a little link up on our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and look forward to talking to you soon.
That's great. Thanks for having me, David.
Thanks.